Greetings, everyone. Welcome to Artcasters number 174. We're coming. If you're watching this live, we're on a little later. Our guest Teresa, she's in Spain, so it's real early for her. Plus, I had a kind of a dinner party that I messed up in scheduling because back when we scheduled this, it was before we were on daylight savings times and we switched over. So anyway, it's kind of a mess. But hopefully this will all work out. And for you night owls in the chat, how you guys doing? But anyway, so excuse me. And I have to warn everyone, I may have had a little too many drinks tonight, but I think I'm okay.
This should be interesting.
Yeah. All right. So let's kind of go around like we usually do. You're on my channel, so I guess you probably know who I am. The main thing I've got to promote right now is my Kickstarter for my comic book Young and the Dead, which I'm beginning to find out that because it's titled Young and the Dead, that's raising some flags in Facebook, and I'm not really able to do much promotion because it keeps saying I'm violating their not terms of service, but whatever their whatever, I forget what they call it, but so yeah, I'm having some problems there. So if you haven't heard much from me about promoting the Kickstarter lately, that's why. So if you haven't back, or if you're thinking about it, go check it out. You can find it at youngandthedead.com. And looks like Josh got booted out. So we'll wait for Josh, and then but we're just gonna move over to Teresa. How you doing, Teresa?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Good. Do you have anything you want to promote or anything?
Well, we have the anthology, Werewolves and Unicorns and Other Mythical Creatures, that is coming on Kickstarter anytime soon, so keep an eye on it. And my comic, Graduation Nightmares, is on Webtoons. You can look just Graduation Nightmares, and it's the only comic called like that, so you'll find it.
Okay. Yeah, I put a link to your YouTube in the description of the video, but I'll have to get that link so I can share that as well.
Oh yeah, I have a YouTube as well. I forgot.
Yeah, and I definitely want to talk to you about your comic projects and find a little more about what you're doing with the 100s anthology. But since Josh is here, hopefully, can you hear us, Josh?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Josh is having like major problems. So
yeah, the worst internet ever. Sorry.
So we're gonna get back. We're moving all over the place. We're gonna get back to Trace in a minute. But hey, Josh, what's going on? Anything you want to promote? What's going on in your world?
What I don't want to promote is the local cable company because it's the worst internet connection in the world. I would like to promote quarterlystories.com, and you can check out my comic about faith and mental illness there. And then you can also go to topis.io, and you can kind of read it on your Android or iOS device there. And add it to your library and stuff by searching for Quarterly Stories. So yeah, that's the one thing. If I'm not cutting out, can you guys hear me?
No, I can hear you.
Awesome.
Yep.
And you got the classic shirt on today, the one that makes you all the money.
Yeah, yeah, it's a good one.
Okay.
Sure.
All right. So Teresa, I wanted to talk about your comics and everything. We want to find out a little bit more about what you're doing for the anthology, and then your personal your web cartoon. But I just want to first of all, I want to say you're one heck of a cartoonist. I love your stuff. There's got a lot of emotion in it, and it's just I really like it. And if you haven't checked out Teresa's YouTube channel, definitely check it out, because she does the same stuff we do, where we just kind of talk about art and the business of art and just making art and all that kind of stuff, and it's just really good stuff. So
thank you. So my 100s contribution is like everyone else, like 4 pages, except you, of course, because you're doing the cover. And it's a story, well, they say werewolves versus unicorns, and everyone took it really literally, but I understood like, oh, freedom. And so I'm making it about witches. So it's a witchcraft school, and there's little girls growing up, being friends,
Is there a werewolf in it? Because I thought I saw something.
There is a werewolf in it, yes. Right. Okay. In the end, when I realized about the title, I was like, oh, crap. So I took Marshall's werewolf, actually. I stole his design because I hadn't designed one, and I used it at the end. Because, yeah.
Yeah, because I know
initially that werewolf was going to be a witch, but I changed it.
I think that's cool. I probably should have thrown like a little, probably should have thrown something in the background. I know Gaz was doing his was a werewolf story, and then he threw, I think, in the background a little unicorn, like stuffed animal, just to kind of. I probably should have done something like that, but I didn't really have the foresight to do that.
Yeah, I'm using Martha Werewolf, and I'm using one of Mike's goblins as well.
Oh, awesome! That's awesome. Yeah, I love that, all that hidden stuff that you get, so that you can throw in there. I usually try to, like, I know with Young and the Dead, I throw a lot of little 80s references in the backgrounds and stuff like that. Like in the new issue, they're in this convenience store, and you get all these old candies. I don't know if you guys have the same stuff in Spain, but there was stuff like the Whistle Pops, and like we had these chips called Oboises and all kinds of weird things. Probably didn't have that because that probably doesn't make a whole lot of sense out in Spain, but because out in Idaho, that's where they have the potatoes, in Boise, Idaho. So they had these Boise chips, and so I just find all that old stuff that I remember that they don't make anymore, Jolt Cola and all that stuff, and throw that in there. But anyway, so so what's your main comic all about? Your web comic?
Well, it's about this girl called Helena that is graduating from university next week. Not next week in real life, like next week in the comic. And she's having nightmares and can't sleep. And so she's decided to take action in real life in order to stop her nightmares. But she doesn't know what she's doing. So it's silly. It's like a slice of life, kind of supernatural, silly thing.
Sounds awesome. I gotta definitely check that out. All right, so usually when we have guests on, which is always rare to have a guest on, but we usually like to ask kind of what if there's a particular topic that they want to talk about, something that's near and dear to them, or something that they just want to kind of bat around and discuss. And you gave us a whole list of stuff, which is awesome because that makes my job a lot easier. But the crux of it is we just want to talk about personal projects and kind of managing those projects. So I guess I want to ask you why, what's on your mind as far as that goes? Why did you kind of want to talk about that? Is that something that's going on, like a problem or something that you're trying to wrangle or trying to figure out now?
I think, yeah, it's just like you guys have a personal project, I have a personal project, and I think you guys are doing a really good job at managing it, and I just want to hear what you think about it.
Yeah. Well, definitely, I don't know how long you've been cartooning, but some of that kind of comes because I'm a little older. So some of that kind of comes with time and everything. You kind of figure stuff out, because I know in the beginning, and I've talked about this before, where my personal project before was basically me doing, like, say 4 pages and then not liking them and starting them over and doing that over and over again. So it took a while to kind of get to where I am right now. Not that I have everything, figured out by far, but yeah, I don't know, Josh. What are some of your? Because I was watching one of your videos, Teresa, and you were talking about kind of like the kind of keeping your day job and everything like that. And as far as to me, I think that advice is good for some people, but it's kind of like, I don't know that one size fits all, because I have heard a lot of people that kind of, and I'm not telling anyone quit their day job and do comics, right? But I think different people work different ways. Like, I know a lot of people that, especially if they have like a creative day job, sometimes they'll go to their job and they'll just get burnt out on being creative. So when they come home, they can't really, they just don't feel like doing their own personal art projects. And then, like me, I don't know if I ever had that issue, but or not to the extent where I just was too tired to do it. So I think it's just that kind of depends on the person, I think. So you kind of have to, that's something you have to figure out for yourself. If you are getting, if you do go to, like, again, I'm not saying quit your day job, but if you find that you're just tired at the end of the day and you're not able to do that, then you got to try to figure something else out. I know it's like, for a while when I was starting off, I would work like part-time. I'd have a part-time job, sometimes it could be construction or whatever, and that would leave me more time to work on my stuff. And then sometimes I'd work a full-time job. Sometimes I'd work full freelance. So I've kind of gone all over the place, but I've always had, personal projects, and it wasn't I guess it wasn't until recently that I really kind of, like I was talking about before, kind of found a way to make it work. And a lot of that for me, as far as managing, and I put out videos on this before, but I really like Trello. And like, some people say that list making isn't great, you know, but I like the list making. I like the fact of, you know, the idea of being able to check things off. I like the idea of being able to set deadlines for certain things. And sometimes, like in the beginning of the year, I will set all these goals for my personal projects and everything else. And then once I start working on them, it's like the deadlines start coming up, and I'm like, and these are self-imposed deadlines. So some are like, okay, now this deadline's here. Is it super important that I switch over just to get this done, or can I bump it back? And then you just kind of have to prioritize. And I think for me, it's kind of rethinking things as you go along. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what about you, Josh? What's kind of your way of, you know, being productive and everything as far as working on your because I mean, it just amazed me, like the work you were doing with your own comic, and also the 100 days plus day job as an art director, all that stuff, and you know, pretty much just killing it. So how do you do that?
Well, I mean, for one thing, something to keep in mind is I rarely meet any creatives who actually feel like they're killing it. Like, so that's something to kind of keep in mind. I think a lot of the time, when you're working on personal projects, it's kind of a gate that once you open, you're guaranteeing a few things. When you work on personal projects, you start fulfilling yourself as an artist, which is usually the purpose of it. You start kind of learning all sorts of new, amazing things. You get the experience of being able to actually see something through from start to finish without being micromanaged or managed at all in the process. And the neat thing about that is you kind of level up as an artist by doing them, because when you work in commercial art, it's a very slightly different thing, where you're usually kind of, and by design, because you're basically executing something that someone else is telling you to do. So it's a really interesting exercise as an artist to like start doing the thing you want to do, rather than kind of waiting for someone to come along and hand you a paycheck to do it. And I encourage artists like who are even pursuing, like, you know, even if, let's say you're pursuing just doing art as a full-time career, whether it's in-house or it's freelance or whatever, I recommend to not just get lost in the day-to-day doing, you know, art just for money, because like it at least in my own experience, has not led to like mass fulfillment, even with like massive clients that you'd really kill to work for. There's like this hole in most artists that I know, that isn't really quite filled until you're working on personal work. So when it comes to me, I have this weird story of kind of doing the opposite of a lot of people I know. I worked some in-house jobs. I hated office environments. I kind of hated, I just kind of didn't like the whole working for other people thing. And so I spent the majority of my career really just working for myself and for other people, obviously for clients and stuff, but, you know, working from home in my PJs and stuff, you know, which was kind of awesome and sustained me for a long time, allowed me to branch out into the career I have now. But what's interesting is part of why I took an in-house job, and Scott, you know, I know you've had kind of a split of sort of both scenarios. And so I think we're kind of in a similar boat with this, because we both lived on either side of the issue. But for me, it's like I thought the appeal of freelance was that like I'd be able to work on my own projects whenever I wanted. And then I actually found that rather than just kind of being able to work on things whenever I wanted, I actually had less time because I was spending more time trying to kind of secure the next client. And so I just found these windows of opportunity to work on my own personal work really that they were really thin and few and far between. And so suddenly the idea of like kind of being in-house with a somewhat stable hourly situation, not like super stable, nothing's secure, nothing's stable, but a slightly predictable schedule to where I could actually start like making a daily habit of working on my work. Now, that doesn't mean you can't do that, you know, when you're freelancing. It's just for my personality. I realize like I really, and I know I've gone on this rant before on here, but I really haven't had like a moment where paid work has really super provided me with any fulfillment as an artist. And I sought all kinds of work like that as a freelancer and closed a lot of giant accounts and stuff. And I just never quite felt like as good as I felt when I'm just working on my own personal comics. And so like, to me, I just kind of got to this point of like, well, I mean, the nice thing about my position now is like, I don't have, like, I have to secure the clients with art, but I don't have to seek them out. Like somebody else is doing that. I don't have to do the finances. Somebody else is doing that. I don't have to cover the overhead of the business. I just have to like do my job well and kind of please the client or the clients. And in that case, like, as long as I'm doing that, like, you know, and there's a job there, I have like a somewhat stable schedule so I can plan and create my own personal projects. So I don't know if that makes sense, but it's like a lot of people go freelance for the same reason, because they just get stuck in a 9-to-5, and they catch themselves not working on art. My take on it, and this is just an early tip, because I think my situation is really similar to yours, Scott, in the sense that I would catch myself very much in that like comic loophole where you, you make like 4 pages and then scratch them and start again because they're not perfect, you know, for years. And I think the quick way out of that is just to just start now. Like, don't wait to have to quit your day job. Don't wait for the perfect client to come around. Don't wait for when you have a full-time art job. Don't wait for when you don't have a full-time art job. Just like literally as an artist, if you get like a magic gig at Disney, you'll find that you have less time than you did before you had that gig at Disney. Basically, the point being, if you're waiting for a perfect time, you're going to be waiting a long time because there is no perfect time. And so if you want to do personal projects, like a good place to start, regardless of your work situation, is just start now. So that means if you're like waiting tables, you know, like once again, I think, Scott, you'll know this, and then I don't want to hog much more of the time, but you know, you'll meet people who like are waitressing, or they're, you know, like in school, or their parents, or they're something, and that something is usually like the thing they'll tell you, like, oh, I'd love to do that, but, you know. So it'll be like, oh, I'd love to do comics, but I have like a life and I have to do these things. And when I hear that, I tend to think, I mean, I know there are some situations where it's completely true, like it's impossible to get time to kind of make personal projects. But I tend to just kind of feel like, oh, okay, this person's never going to get the time to work on personal projects because they keep giving, well, I'd love to, but, you know, which I don't know if that makes sense. So that's kind of a very long-winded version of what you were talking about, Scott. I hope that kind of helps. I don't know.
Yeah. So I wanted to find out kind of from Teresa, like, what, how do you kind of balance your, what's kind of your work-life balance? I know that was something you had mentioned, or is that something you're struggling with?
Work-life balance. So, well, 2 things. I want to pick up 2 things from what Scott said. Well, what you said and what and what Josh said. From Josh, I like to pick up like having a magical job at Disney. That sounds amazing. and the whole thing, like, I love how you said, like, oh, I can make comics because I have a life, and that's the gist of it, right? If you are waiting for your life to stop in any way to make comics, then you're never going to make a comic. And that's the way I see it. And for me, my work-life balance is simply that early on, when I started cartooning quite late in life, like when I was at university, and I was already studying English, and I was going to be a teacher, and I figured I can change, right? I can change degrees, I can start drawing, whatever. But then I thought, if I go to study illustration or whatever, I'm going to end up having a day job in illustration. So it's never going to be about making my own comics. So whatever job you choose, whatever career path you choose, in the end, you're going to have a day job.
Yeah, exactly.
So I said, being a teacher is as good as working in-house for a design company or whatever. So who cares? So yeah, I'm a teacher. That's my day job.
Oh, awesome.
Now, does that afford you, like, and I know, correct me if I'm wrong, but in Spain you have different kind of, it's not like here in the States, it's pretty much it's like an all year round thing now, except for, typically teachers have summers off. Do you have, like, as a teacher, do you have certain downtime where you can focus more on, where you don't have to work for long stretches of time, where you can focus more on your art and everything?
Well, it's been a bit of a balancing act. Initially, I was working as a secondary school teacher, and there was no balance in that at all. It was only the summer. I was knackered. I was burnt out. I had 6 weeks, and I went on holidays like every other teacher. And so I didn't do much. And so I became a freelance teacher. So I teach adults. I teach in companies and things like that. And I am my own boss. So I don't have to do any of the paperwork and the bureaucratic stuff and parents' evening and whatnot. So all that extra time that I'm not doing bureaucracy, I'm doing comics. That's basically it.
Awesome.
So I had to pivot a little bit.
But it sounds like, and I'm sure you didn't pick a career in teaching, or maybe I'm wrong, but just because it would afford you, or just because it worked well with your love of being an artist.
No.
But sometimes that's something to consider. There are certain occupations, wherever, that kind of work better with having that time to work as an artist. Like I've known people who, like, they'll work security jobs like late at night, where really they could just sit there and bring their sketchbook or their artwork, and they could, they're just basically sitting here kind of looking out or waiting for people, or come through a gate or something, like a toll booth or whatever, and they can work on their projects while they're working. So that's one way to do it. But there are there's certain occupations that you can take that kind of allow you to have a little more time to pursue your art while you're also getting paid doing something else. So that might be something to consider,
Yeah, keep in mind, like, Harvey Picar, right? Like, worked like a mailroom job till pretty much he retired, and put out like just a ton of comics. And part of why he kept the mail job was because it allowed him to do comics, and so it's like, it's definitely one of those things where I agree with what you're saying, Teresa, because it's like it's basically, it is one of those cases of like really doing the math, like wherever you work, even if it's for like an art house or an art company, it's a job, and at the end of the day, your personal projects are still going to sit, unless you just kind of get them going. So I think that's great. Whatever you can kind of do, and then if you can make it related to your skill or your skill set, like, or you can get something that has like, hours that are kind of allow you to be creative and stuff like that. I think that's a hugely smart thing. So that's cool that you've kind of found a thing that allows you the time. And I shouldn't say allows you the time, because I don't think it ever comes easy to make the time. but at least something that you can work around to get art done and get stuff accomplished. That's really cool.
Yeah.
So speaking of accomplishing things, one of the notes that you put down, Teresa, was setting personal deadlines. So what's kind of how do you do that as far as your comics? Because you've got the 100s comic and your ongoing comic, plus your job as a teacher. So how do you kind of manage deadlines? Do you do you set deadlines and all that, or do you have a certain, maybe you have a post schedule as far as your web comic that you have to hit and all that?
No, I don't have a post schedule or specific deadlines because I'm very bad at predicting how long things are going to take me.
Okay.
So what I do is I set myself work commitment times. So for instance, instead of saying I want to have 2 pages in this week, I say I'm going to work 1 hour on Monday, 2 hours on Tuesday. So I just do like very detailed timetables, and I just put the time that I'm going to put in and make sure that there's at least half an hour. It's kind of like based on the 100 days of making comics.
Okay.
So I just insert time for my comic there.
So yeah, I guess it's kind of weird that I didn't even think about that, but that's like the perfect thing, especially, that's what it was designed for. So it's awesome that you can kind of work that, and that's one way to kind of work that into your lifestyle. And going back to what we were talking about before was, I don't want to tell anyone, quit their day job, but if the job that you're having, if it isn't like one of these jobs that kind of allows you also enough free time to do your personal projects, maybe some sort of career change might be something you might want to consider if that is the case. But I just think that there's there's ways to balance both. So but maybe sometimes it's just, whether it's your personality or your discipline or whatever, you kind of have to figure out what works best for you.
Yeah. And seconding that, just with the qualification of, I think that sometimes like artists will, like as I said before, kind of have this idea of this magic window of time just kind of being handed to you as an artist. And that, they might have this perception that like people who are really productive and maybe have like really nice careers in art or something have some kind of thing you don't have. And a lot of the time that's not really the case. It's just they're sleeping 30 minutes less a day than you are, or working 30 minutes more a day. And so I think coming up with a schedule like Teresa was talking about, where it's like, 30 minutes a day based on the hundreds or something like that, like really just kind of scheduling out the time and making it happen. It's a good habit to build, especially if like Scott was saying, like if you did want to quit your day job or something, you want to make sure you can build that kind of habit. Because when it's freelance, it's a lot of work. It's just a lot of work regardless. Like it's hard to get around work unless if you're somebody with really wealthy parents or something, and you have a mass inheritance and can just work on comics full time. Please cut Scott and Teresa and I in on that. We'd like to join your comic company.
Josh, you mentioned that a lot, and I've never, so far, I haven't come across anyone who's in that.
I know.
In that scenario. I want to meet that person though. That
I know.
would be awesome.
I do too.
Yeah.
So go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just gonna say I do know some people that have like family money. And I find that doesn't necessarily advance your career because you become very complacent. So,
yeah,
a little bit of necessity always goes a long way.
Yeah, 100.
But not too much. It's like just the right amount. Because I was saying in the video that Scott was mentioning that if I'm afraid that I'm not going to have enough money for food, then how am I going to spend any time working on my personal project?
Right. I mean, you definitely have to prioritize. I mean, and that's one of the things I think we're talking about. But, and it kind of also ebbs and flows. I mean, at least if for me as a, who's kind of back to doing freelance, And we've talked about this too with the the feast or famine or whatever, but there's certain times where, I've got a lot of work and I don't have as much time to work on my personal project. And then you kind of, hopefully you can plan for that and put some money aside, so then when your time does free out, then you free up, you can kind of go back. So it's a balancing act, and that's kind of what we're talking about. But one of the things you put a note here, and I want to read it because I find it funny, but I want to find out what you meant by this, or if this is something that you kind of go through. But it says, feeling like a weirdo sitting at the table drawing while everyone else is living their lives fully. So do you feel like as an artist you're not living your life to its full capacity?
Well, you see, right now it's 6:30 in the morning, and here I am in my studio. The sun hasn't even come out, and I'm drawing a comic. So yeah, I do kind of feel sometimes like, what am I doing? Like, I don't know. And I've seen this with professional comic artists, especially with Chris, where he draws himself on his table, wasting his life a lot of the times. And I think I'm not the only one who feels this. I hope. I don't know.
Yeah, well, Josh can talk for days about Chris Ware, so.
I love it. I mean, I think that's something really common with cartoonists, where it's an isolated job, and even if you're working in teams, usually they're remote teams, and so it's a pretty weird thing to choose to do for a large quantity of time. And I think most people who choose to do it kind of have like an addiction. So it's kind of a joke among most cartoonists I know that, like, it's like a bad drug habit, because we're constantly trying to make the time to do it, get the resources to do it, get friends into doing it. But we all, I don't know, I've rarely met a cartoonist who's just like, I enjoy like 100% of the process. This is the best thing ever. More often than not, I usually meet cartoonists who are like, somebody else is having more fun doing this than I am, but I kind of can't stop because I really like doing it, but I kind of hate it. Like, it's a weird love-hate thing that I definitely relate to that.
Yeah, I just want to say, like, to Teresa's comment about feeling like a weirdo, to me, it's almost like I feel like the people who aren't doing this kind of stuff are the weirdos to me. So it's like, I think it really helps. And obviously you're involved in the whole 100 Days Making Comics community and everything, but it really helps to get out and reach out, even if it's just online, and hopefully maybe even in person if you can, reach out to other artists. And because it is very hard for like kind of the normal people to understand what this kind of lifestyle is all about. And it is nice to actually, get online and commiserate with other artists and everything, so you don't feel like such a weirdo, because there's people that, that are doing the same thing and love it and everything. And it's, but I have friends who aren't artists, and, I'll start talking about this stuff and it's just like, they tune out, they just they don't get it. So, and, but those are friends I talk about different things with, so.
I try to avoid the topic. No, yeah, the thing is, I didn't go to art school. I think this is a consequence of that. I've never been into an art class. I don't have any art friends. I mean, I do from online, but not in real life. So I think that definitely contributes to my feeling of I'm a weirdo, I'm the only person doing this.
Yeah, no, I relate. When I first started cartooning kind of seriously, I was still in college, but like I didn't know anyone who was actually making comics. And since then, a lot of my friends from that time have since taken on comics. But I just felt so weird because people would be like, we're going out to a movie, come hang out. And I'd be like, no, I'm just going to sit for like 16 hours straight and just draw. And they're like, what are you doing? Like, what's wrong with you? Or they'd be like, oh, we're off work. Like, this is great. And I'm like, I'm literally never off work. Sorry. I just like to get this stuff done. But, I don't know. I do agree with Scott. Like the more you can kind of build a community, whether it's online and virtual or not, it does at least make you realize, like, the more I get into this, the more I'm kind of along the lines of where Scott is, where I kind of started viewing, this is going to sound terrible, but it's like almost as if, in the Harry Potter world, how there's people who like you know, kind of do magic, and then there's the muggles.
Oh yeah, yeah. I use that phrase to talk about like non-artist people too. So.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. I feel like we're kind of dipping into making magic, and that there's the muggles. And so, you know, you have to live among muggles, but it's going to be hard to talk magic with them. But if you meet another like wizard, you're like, yeah, we're magicians. This is amazing. You know what I mean? I don't know if that makes sense.
No, yeah, it makes sense. It makes so much sense. Anything explained with a Harry Potter analogy makes a lot of more sense to me.
Nice.
Right. So let's talk about sharing your work online, because that's another note. And this is something that I struggle with, and what I'm finding right now is sometimes even when you want to share, it's difficult, because I'm having a ton of problems like sharing my stuff on Facebook, because evidently it's, like I mentioned before, it's triggering some weird, you know, I don't know, but they're not letting me post a lot of stuff. But like one thing I'm good at is I think YouTube. I've got a good handle on YouTube, but a lot of the other, like Instagram and Facebook and you know, pretty much everything other than YouTube, I struggle, you know, to post. And sometimes it's a matter of me just getting so deep into the work that I forget to share it. Sometimes, you know, it's things that I can't share yet. And then sometimes I'll record things like this. I can't show right now what I'm working on for a client, but I've been taking screenshots of it. But then, you know, I can't show it now. But when it gets to the point where I can show it, it's like, well, that seems weird for me to share that, because that was a long time ago I was working on that. So I don't know. What did you what are your thoughts on just sharing online, and what are some of the reasons why you wanted to talk about that? Or how do you feel, Teresa, how do you feel like, is that something you're good at? Is it something that you need to work on?
It's definitely something I need to work on. But what I was, the angle I was coming at it from is that when you're creating a personal project, you have to promote it, you have to share it, you have to get it out there so that people can see it. And sometimes it feels like, because it is my own personal project, I just feel like, who cares?
Mm-hmm.
And so I am more prone to sharing something. This is ridiculous, but I am more likely to share like my figure drawing studies, which is, again, who cares, than my comic. I don't know why, but I really struggle to share my comic and promote it and stuff like that.
I know a lot of, you know, and it's weird because a lot of people, it seems like the progress stuff, at least like when I do share on Instagram, it seems like the sketches and stuff, they get a lot more response and likes than sometimes even the finished art does, for whatever reason. I don't know why that is, but a lot of people, and that might be the same reason why you like to post your, you know, your figure drawing as opposed to, you know, the finished comics. I don't know, you know.
Yeah, I suppose it's because Instagram is a photograph app, and so it's something you can photograph. It's not like a gallery or a portfolio site. I don't know, maybe.
Yeah.
But it just feels weird.
Yeah.
I haven't really got used to it, and this is this is happening. Well, this has been happening to me for a long time since I started social media. I always struggle to post. I always get this feeling of, who cares? Who's gonna care about what I have to say? And then you see so many people posting every 3 minutes about memes and nonsense, and it's like, well, this is what social media is for.
Yeah, it's weird because a lot of people, you know, it's like when they share their social media, it's a lot of selfies and stuff like that, and you know, sometimes, you know, I have to tell people if they go, oh, you're on Instagram, and I'll say, yeah, but it's all artwork. So I mean, certain people like different things. Like, I don't care about looking at people's selfies or whatever, but you know, if you look at my Instagram feed, it's all artwork. But you know, so it's just a weird thing. But I think I think different social media platforms work better for certain things. I think, you know, I think different, depending on what your interests are. If you're a foodie, obviously, maybe you want to look at a lot of pictures of food or whatever, which, you know, that stuff just makes me hungry, and I don't want to see that because I'm trying to, you know, keep on a diet and everything. So, but yeah, so it's all different. But what's your social media platform of choice, or what do you find that you like? Because I know you're on YouTube, I know you're on Facebook, Instagram, pretty much the same, you know, things we're on. But what kind of what's your favorite? What do you like about it? You know.
I'm not actually on Facebook. People think
Oh,
I
you're
am,
not?
but I'm
Okay.
not. I am, but I'm not. It's like a personal
You
account
posted
that.
over hundreds, though, right?
Yeah, but that's like a personal account. If you go into it, you'll see like nothing. I don't post in it, so it's not like an actual. It's private. It's like, yeah, I don't use Facebook. I don't know why.
Okay. Well,
But anyway, I've limited myself to YouTube and Instagram. I know a lot of people, oh, go on Twitter, go on Facebook, and I'm like, I don't wanna. And basically, my take on it is that I have to do it.
Yeah.
That's it. I don't like it. I don't enjoy the attention. I don't like it.
Okay.
I'm gonna be honest.
Yeah.
Making videos is a little bit better. I'm quite enjoying that, but it's because you're making something. It's not like on Instagram where you're taking a picture. And I'm not a photographer, and maybe if I work a little bit more on my photography, I would like it more. I don't know.
It's really interesting to me that you gravitate more to YouTube when it seems like, because by your own admission, you don't really want to share, but in YouTube, you're sharing a lot more because you're sharing part of your personality, you're sharing more of your opinion, you're sharing, to me, there's a lot more. And you're not just putting like artwork, like speed videos, you're actually talking about the artwork and the process and all that stuff. So it's interesting that you kind of gravitate more towards YouTube, especially if you kind of like your attitude is like, well, who's going to care, that type of thing. Because for me, like I said, I don't really have that. Who's going to care? For me, it's just a matter of, oh, I totally spaced out and got too busy, or I forgot to share, and now it's kind of too late. So it's interesting the different angles people have, you know, how they approach different things. But I would hopefully encourage you and tell you that, yeah, people do care. There are people out there that do care, and if you can hopefully get out of that, I think, because I mean I think with art, especially nowadays, I mean, because the chance of people just discovering you and picking you up and publishing you and all that, I don't know how easy. I think you really need to start, you know, promoting yourself is kind of what you have to do nowadays. And I still struggle with it, but I'm getting better at it. It's just something, because there's so many things I do right now that I would not have done. Like I'm going to a conference in a couple weeks. I would have been like, a couple of years ago, I was like, no, I don't want to do that. I want to get out and converse with people. I want to stay here in my studio and just work. But I'm trying to kind of, break some of those habits and get out and do things that I think are going to benefit me. And sometimes that stuff's scary, but sometimes you just have to do it. And the more you do it, the better you get. When I was recording my video for the new Kickstarter, I was looking back at my original Kickstarter, and I basically took a lot of that copy that I used before and just redid it. But if you look at both those videos, it's like night and day as far as how much more comfortable I am now, 2 years later, I guess, to where I was then. So it's just, you just gotta start and just gradually go, and you'll get better at it. You'll get more comfortable with it, and I think you'll start to like actually sharing and everything, hopefully. So anyway, that's my experience.
Yeah, I come at it from the perspective of like completely relating, because my inclination when I first got out was just to make good work, and then people should just kind of pay attention to good work if it's made good, and that's about it. I don't want to have to do all the sales stuff. And then through years of like kind of doing freelance and stuff, it just kind of became a necessity. So it was more of like well, I kind of have to do this to get the work. And then as I've gotten older now, I'm kind of mixed about it, because I relate to the idea of like, well, why should I post this? Because no one cares. I mean, I think that's in the back of most artists' heads, where you complete something really great and you're like, I mean, it happens to almost every artist I know, where it's like you can make something you spend like weeks on, and it's beautiful, and it's good, and you put it up and you get like 2 likes. but then you post like a sketch of like Deadpool. You're like, yeah, this was cool. I like Deadpool or something. And there's like a bunch of likes. And you're like, well, why did that get likes? But the thing that like you're invested in. So like to me, I almost wonder from hearing what you're saying, I wonder if the reason it's hard to post, like it's not so hard to post stuff that are like sketches. Well, this is my thing about myself. Like to me, that wouldn't be as hard because it wouldn't hurt as hard if like people didn't care. But with something like a comic where you're investing like mass amounts of time and energy and you're trying to tell a story, and you know, every cartoonist I know, like whether they're doing like humor comics, they're doing short comics, they're doing long form comics, their comics are really personal to them. And so it's like, it really does suck when you post comics and no one, like I think there's a fear that there will be like no response. I have that lingering for finishing my graphic novel because at this point I've invested quite a few years. So I have this fear of just like, if I put up a Kickstarter and it's just like at $0 for like a month, you know, like that scares the devil out of me. And I'm sure like, Scott had a little bit of trepidation when he was going into the Kickstarter he just finished for his comic, because it's like, well, you know, like once again, if I like throw up an image that I'm like, hey, I did a poster design and maybe it doesn't sell so great, it's like, it's a small time invested, so it'll suck, but it's not like a, oh wow, I spent a year and a half on that and no one cares. Like that's a different feeling. So to me, I almost wonder if maybe that's the motive behind kind of being hesitant to share it, because it hurts a lot more if people don't care about it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely. I don't know. But like for me, I feel like I'm kind of in between, but I definitely have always been a big proponent of like, you gotta shamelessly self-promote everything you're doing. And if you feel weird about it, just look at all the people out there shamelessly self-promoting stuff that's not that great and realize like, well, worst case scenario, you're going to be that person. Best case scenario, you'll be, you know, posting better stuff. So like, you know what I mean? There's not really a huge risk. Although once again, I'm no expert at it. Like Scott's had YouTube kind of take off. I've never really found the thing for me, but I always like, I stick with YouTube because I love it. I love the community. But it's like, I still haven't found like that perfect window of social media where I'm like, this is my platform. Like, I have no idea. I just kind of keep trying and we'll see kind of mentality, you know? I don't know if that makes sense.
I don't know if YouTube ever took off. It's just kind of a gradual thing for me because I keep.
Oh, yeah.
But
wait, nobody just gave you the YouTube magic wand and just said,
that hasn't happened yet. But Mike says if you never have any expectations, you'll never be disappointed.
Yeah, it's a fair point.
So let's see. So we want to talk about let's see, where are we at? So we're talking about sharing online, self-publishing. You had mentioned talking about pursuing traditional publishers. Is that something that you've looked into? Because I honestly don't have a lot of experience with that, but I know Josh is, you know, he's been published by traditional publishers and things like that. But I don't know, Teresa, what's your thought on that? Is that something you're pursuing, or?
No, it's just like, how do you make that decision? So basically, like, yeah, that's it. I was thinking, I'm starting to make comics now that are longer, and I was just considering, like, should I contact publishers or should I do it myself? Like, how do you make that choice?
Yeah.
That was my question for you guys.
The weird thing, and like I said, I don't have a lot of experience with this, but it seems like nowadays those traditional publishers already want you to have, it's kind of a weird catch-22 situation, because it seems like they want you to already have a big social media following. But if you have a big enough social media following, maybe you don't need those traditional publishers.
Yeah.
But I mean, I don't think it's going to hurt, and I do think there's a lot of value that they can do, because just like Josh was saying, when like when he goes into his job, he just has to kind of do the artwork, and well, he has to manage a team too. But there's a lot of other stuff involved that he doesn't have to worry about. So those are some of the benefits to working with a traditional publisher. I imagine that you don't have to do everything yourself. But if a publisher came to me, you know, I'm not going to say no, I don't need you or whatever. But it's not, for me, it's not something I'm really pursuing, because I'm more interested in just trying to build my brand and build a following, and then hopefully, you know, be able to kind of self-publish myself, whether that's Kickstarter, and you know, sometimes you run into some issues like I did, but those aren't, you know, those are some certain things you just can't plan for. But there's but I think if you build an audience, and one of the things that I'm doing right now is that mailing list, and you know, the great thing about a mailing list is you don't have to depend on a social media platform like Facebook that can kind of determine whether or not they're going to share your thing, or have robots that determine whether they're going to share it without fully understanding what it is that they're telling you can't share, when it's pretty much harmless. So you know, sometimes you're at the mercy of those platforms. But I think if you can, you know, I would encourage anyone to start, if you can, start a mailing list early, because I waited far too long. But at least now I'm doing it, and I'm moving in the right direction. So,
yeah, I mean, I think that I kind of agree with Scott. I think the one thing I might disagree with is the idea that it's going to be a scenario where most of the work's done like for you. The one thing I think that I can think of that's a huge advantage of publishers is really distribution, and that's it. So it's like, if you want your stuff in like Barnes and Noble and like all the bookstores, and basically available, the availability of it that you can reach with a publisher is just generally most of the time going to be much more significant than what you'll be able to do on your own. And that's pretty much it. I mean, other than that, there's not necessarily, I mean, I think it used to be that there were a lot of other advantages, but unfortunately, like the scenarios where like my wife's a kids book artist, when she's been published by publishers, it's available everywhere. So that's something like, if she were to just publish her own kids book, that would be a significant problem, right? Because it's like, she's not able to go to every bookstore in multiple countries and be like, here, like, get my book, you know? Whereas they put it in certain distribution cycles that just are available everywhere. The downside is they don't tend to like promote. They don't tend to fly you to different places. There's scenarios where they do. Like, I have one friend who kind of like was that guy, like for, I think, Simon and Schuster, their first book, but like they picked that book, like, this is the book we're going to put all our resources towards. That's really rare. Like, most of the time they'll publish your book, you'll make a moderate, you know, advance, if any advance, especially in comics. Advances are less and less likely to even happen. You know, and then you will order your books at a discount from the publisher, and you will tour it and cycle it yourself. Especially in indie comics, like the majority of that stuff's handled by the individual. And then as you build in reputation, you start getting invited places. Maybe the venue pays for you to kind of do it, or provides you with a free space. As you get bigger, maybe they give you a hotel room, right? You know what I mean? But what's weird is the scenario where the publisher kind of does a lot usually doesn't happen until you're huge. And so it's really just distribution. So like I'd consider it if your goal is to have your book available everywhere. But if you're thinking, oh, that's going to cut out all the touring work, having to book interviews, having to do all of that stuff, surprisingly, it probably won't. Because like I said, I know one person out of all of the people I know have been published who's had that magic scenario where they put all the resources towards that artist. Most of the time, you're going to get a book, and the sales numbers may not even match what you could do on your own. So I mean, that's just my own experience. Once again, it could be different for each person, but it's been interesting. So I always kind of am not sure on it because of that, because I'm like, well, I would definitely want, like, if somebody approached me and wanted to publish my comic, like, I'd definitely be interested. But I also would have this part of me that is like, well, maybe I could sell more than they could of my own comic and then get a better return and make it a little more sustainable. I don't know if that makes sense. It's kind of a weird thing. Indie comics have gone through a real interesting time because you have more options than ever for publishers. But then, like, the amount of money that comics make in general has really dipped since like the 90s, where you had, like, you know, your Jeff Smiths and guys like that who would sell, like, you know, they'd have like bad runs where they're selling like 50 or 60,000 issues a month. Like that era is pretty rare now. So like most indies that I know of, you know, push at like a really successful indie would be like maybe 2,000 a month. And you got to think that's successful. So like, what's a not successful indie? Like most indies are maybe selling like 2,000 copies a year, or maybe 1,000 copies a year. And that's not like crazy numbers. Like that's not undoable numbers. Like that's numbers that, like, most people I know who are doing comics, if they really put their nose to the grindstone, could probably get on their own. So it's a weird, I don't know if that makes sense, but it's like, I'm kind of with you on, like, I don't personally, like, know. I also know, like, some publishers will really pour in the resources to get like the paper quality you want and the look of the book, like the art part of it. Maybe it is worthwhile going with the publisher because they have deals with printers so they can get, you know, French paper and you know, do all the special stuff you want to do with whatever book you're working on. So there's multiple factors, but I definitely would say just pick whatever works. Like if you want to ideally be in every bookstore, approach publishers, and while you're approaching publishers, publish it yourself. And while you're publishing it yourself, like, start booking those interviews and stuff now, because you're still going to have to do that when you have a publisher. You're still going to have to do the convention circuit, all of that. So just start now and like use whatever crack you can in the wall to like get through, you know, because it's like rock and roll, you know. It's like, if you can have your stuff syndicated by, you know, places that are going to get you in Madison Square in New York or something, great. But in the meantime, like, if you want to put out like an EP and like sell it individually at shows, like, that's a really good way in. Because if you wait for someone to kind of come along, it's very similar to like waiting for the time to come along. If you wait for someone to come along and be like, you are the artist, here, like the magic pathway to published comics, that might be a really long wait if it even ends up having like a result. Whereas if you just kind of start by doing it, whatever way it takes, like if you have to photocopy it at work, like staple it and just start handing it out on the street, you know, whatever it takes, like, get your art out there. And like, weirdly enough, you'll probably get similar results if the art's good, you know. Does that make sense? Or I don't know.
Oh yeah, of course.
Yeah. So that's kind of my theory on it, but yeah.
All right. So we're getting through this list here.
It's a great list, by the way. Like he made this amazing kind of topic breakdown, and it's really thorough and awesome and really cool. So thank you.
It kind of concerns me, and I know a lot of people are struggling with this too. And but he got a note here that says, well, under finishing your project, the temptation to quit. So is that something that you find you struggle with a lot?
I know some people that struggle more than me, but that doesn't disqualify me from struggling. So, well, the thing I struggle with the most is not changing projects, not having 3 projects running at the same time. So it's not about quitting, it's about multitasking.
Okay.
That's my main problem.
Do you find that you kind of need, because I know I'm this way, and that's why it takes me so long to get one of my comics out, is because if I was just I'm not, I mean, Josh is pretty much the opposite. I mean, he can sit there and he can work on his long form, you know, comic for, you know, for years. Whereas I need to mix it up with other things. I need to work on my comic, and then I need to kind of move over and work on this other side project, and kind of move back and forth, because I will get easily bored with just one particular project. So I don't know where you fall on that scale, Teresa.
Oh, I fall everywhere on the scale.
Yeah.
I'm a mess. I am doing, at the moment, I am doing a board game with my boyfriend, because I love board games as well. That's another problem. It's like, if you have to choose two industry that makes no money, I think comics is one of the best one, followed by board games, right?
That's true.
So yeah, I'm making a board game with my boyfriend. No, actually two board games. And I have my graduation nightmares. I'm writing a script for another comic right now. And I'm doing the anthology, which is going to be finished soon. So that's okay. And, you know, and then I have a notebook where I write all my ideas so that I don't have to work on them.
Yeah.
So yeah, having too many ideas, too many projects is one of the bigger problems I have.
Yeah. I don't want to get too much into board games, but I do kind of want to mention, I know, like with comics and stuff, I mean, you know, and we always say that there's no money in comics and everything, but you see a lot of crowdfunding comics that can bring in some money. I mean, maybe, you know, maybe for all the ones that we see that are successful, I'm sure there's a lot that aren't. But it seems like the board game space is on Kickstarter is really big too. And the thing that I'm noticing a lot, because my son, who was just sitting over here, he's working on like a, you know, sort of a role-playing game, developing a role-playing game. So he's heavily into that. But the one thing that I do notice now that you didn't used to see before is that the creators of board games are at least getting some sort of recognition, because you'll see a board game and you'll say created by. You didn't used to see that. You know, it used to be, you know, it's either Parker Brothers or Melton Bradley or whatever, but you're not seeing, oh, this is a game created by so and so. So I mean, that's one thing that's kind of cool. That kind of seems like it seems like those two areas kind of fit well together, comics and now kind of this renaissance that some of the board games have had. But yeah, I mean, that's, and I know, you know, I don't know kind of what they pay, but I know a lot of the people that are developing board games, they need art for those board games too. So it's, you know, that might be an avenue for people to think about if they're, you know.
Yeah, as a freelance illustrator, it pays normal. It pays, yeah, normal.
Yeah.
I've done a little bit of freelance for board game companies, and yeah, they pay okay. But as a designer, you don't get a lot. I think the designer is the person that gets the least, and that's the issue.
Okay, that's kind of interesting, because it seems like the designer is probably typically I would assume the owner of the idea and the concept, right?
Yeah, but for some reason, because of so when you print a book, it's just a book, it's just paper. But when you print a board game, you have 3D printing, you have the boxes, you have the design. I think the production cost is a lot higher on a board game. So the margin for the designer, the idea person, is less. At least that's what I understand, because, you know, I've done my research, but I haven't really designed anything and put it out there. So I think those margins that you see on Kickstarter, like, oh, $250,000 for, you know, such and such game, but it's normally like miniature games with a high production cost, and the margin is really low.
Okay.
So even if you see them doing well at the end, it goes to the 3D printers, it goes to the everything else.
Like a card game would be a really good one for just low cost, because that's like paper But a board game, if you have stock pieces, you might be able to cut the cost. Like if you just use those little pegs or something. But yeah, that is definitely a much more like a huge endeavor to kind of manufacture, especially if you have like custom pieces that are 3-dimensional and stuff like that.
Yeah, and the shipping costs.
What's weird is the shipping is going to be insane, but what's weird is the cost might actually be lower than a book sometimes. Because a lot of what the board is, like the board itself is just like cardboard, you know, with like cloth wrapped around it, and then a large, nice, you know, hard to scuff like 3D physical print of like a big poster. So it's like the cost of a poster. with like a little bit of backing board on it. But the box, that gets into a little bit more. It's funny, I used to do those in-house for an education company, and they were some of the funnest projects we'd get were like these educational board games where like one of the ones I designed was like a spy scenario where you'd like travel through these different supervillains like hideouts, you know. And we just kind of ripped off like the layout of Sorry and kind of modified it a little bit. But they're super fun to design. And I used to actually, when I taught at LCAD, that was one of the assignments, was to kind of make actually your own board game and pieces and rules, and it had to be functional. It's a super fun thing. But yeah, I don't know what the money is like for it. I do know, like Scott, what you're describing, I have definitely witnessed it though, where it's like they get quite large sums, but you might be right. Maybe that 250,000 sounds really good, and then you're like, actually they're having to pay like, you know, $25 per, and they just sold 10,000. Then you're like, oh, okay, that's not so great, you know.
Yeah. And the last one I kickstarted, I paid for on Kickstarter was a game called Holy Grail that it's 2 boxes with lots of miniatures and stuff, and I think it cost us like $80, and that's shipping to Spain from America. So I can't imagine that's a big margin of benefits. Yeah,
that's true. Yeah.
Overall, I think it's like, I don't know, I'm gonna speak in kilos. I think it's like 9 kilos, the package.
Jeez.
I know
where it gets you.
I know. I'm super excited. It's coming in October. It's like big package coming my way. I'm excited.
That's so cool.
Well, that sounds wrong. Big package coming my way.
So, because I probably should get the new one, but I forgot where he's located, but have you guys seen this How to Draw book? Or where's the other one? This one, How to Think When You Draw. I got this. This was an international order, and it was, I mean, it's heavy, so it was a pretty penny to have it shipped. So, but he's got another one going on right now. But that was a really cool project. So sometimes you just like, you gotta kind of bite the bullet on some of the international stuff. But what I do, and I've mentioned this before, is like for international shippers, like shipping for like my Kickstarter, I like to throw in extras because, you know, a print or whatever, or I'm also throwing in some buttons. They don't weigh a lot, so it doesn't cost me that much more to put those in. But it's an extra. It adds extra value to people that are ordering internationally. So when they order, you know, it's like basically the extra that they're having to pay for shipping. It's almost like they're getting something extra for that. So it's kind of almost like a one-to-one type thing. So, but yeah, I mean, that's.
So Mike in the chat just said, "Yo, Louie, I got a kilo of board games over here."
In the States, that's the only time we ever talk about kilos. Is when we're dealing drugs.
It's like great industries for becoming rich.
Mm-hmm. It's tough when your passions are things that and like, once again, I think I do come across as maybe assuaging comics or something. Like there are people out there who make a pretty good living off of comics, and then there's cartoonists that I've actually met that, like, you know, have also made a really good living off of like licensing their properties, and like now live in like the Hollywood Hills and stuff, you know. So it's like there's money out there in comics that people are making, but like most cartoonists I meet like will have like kind of a day job at like in the LA area. A lot of them work at like Adult Swim or like one of the offshoot companies that's doing animation for that. That's their day job, and then they get off, and for some reason where like most of their coworkers get off work and are like, party, let's like watch movies and relax. They're like, I'm gonna hit the drawing board and draw for 10 more hours because that's what I do. So it's a weird thing, because I haven't met a ton of cartoonists who like that's their primary living, but it is possible. Like, I want to definitely clarify, like, I don't think it's impossible to do, but I think if you're banking on comics to kind of make you rich, like you might be in for a sore surprise, you know.
It's the same thing with board games. I mean, you could be like the guy from the Oatmeal and do Exploding Kittens or this Toss the Burrito thing he's got going on right now and make millions off a board game.
Oh yeah.
So there's always those outliers, you know?
You could be making the next like Settlers of Catan and just retire, you know, like yeah.
So as far as, you know, this temptation to quit, what is it that keeps you going? What is it that you do so that you know, to get away from that feeling of, oh, this is just too much, is it worth it? You know, what are some of the motivating, you know, factors that you kind of use to help keep going and keep motivated?
Well, my main thing is that I enjoy it. The end. There's no other trick. It's like I like sitting down and working on my comics and my board games and my scripts and whatever, and I like to see them finished. And I'm kind of attached emotionally, so I have no practical tips other than, you know, emotional attachment and just general craziness. You know, I actually do want to sit here and do it.
Yeah, I think that's really good for people, for some of the artists out there who have not, who kind of are struggling with that, struggling to keep going or whatever. If you haven't actually completed a project, I urge you just start with a small project, because once you've completed something, once you can hold that something in your hand, that's just an incredible feeling, and that's going to help motivate you for the next project, maybe go a little bigger the next time, and gradually, the more stuff that you can actually deliver or ship, or, you know, however you want to describe it, produce or get to a point where you can actually hold it or hand it to somebody. I mean, that's kind of a motivating factor for me. Like, just the fact that, you know, once this Kickstarter goes, and I know it's already funded and everything, that I'll be able to get those books and I'll be able to give them to people. And it's like, I hit that goal again, and I've got another thing that I can put out there, and now that kind of, you know, gets me you know, pumped up to do the next one, because every time after the most motivated I am to start like a new issue of Young and the Dead is right after I've shipped the old one, because it's like, oh man, I love that feeling. I got to get on this other one. So
like, I want to be a bit of a contrarian on that one. I think you got to do the thing you're supposed to do. Like, so if you're like somebody who, like, you feel like you're supposed to make like the great American novel, or you feel like you need to like make a 2,000 page tome, like, you know, you're just like wanting to do Cerebrus or something, like, do it. Like, just start it. And like, you might be like years into it, but here's the thing. Dave Sim did it, and that's how he came up with Cerebrus. Like, you know, I mean, you know, like, Blankets didn't write itself. Like, the graphic novel Craig Thompson made before that, Goodbye Chunky Rice, didn't just appear. It's like, it was something he just worked on and kind of believed in and made happen. My point is, like, regardless, if it's not worthwhile, you're going to like either learn that in the process of it and level up, but at least you'll be able to kind of get up and feel like you're working towards the thing that you're supposed to be doing. So that's my point. If you feel like you're supposed to be doing a t-shirt graphic, then do that, you know. But like, if you feel like, I always feel bad if somebody feels like compelled to do something and they're not doing it. Especially something positive. I mean, if it's something creepy or negative, then maybe don't do that thing you're compelled to do. But if it's something that is like, you know, like a lifelong dream, those things just don't just, like, I do think there's this weird view that they'll kind of arrive on a silver platter or something, and it's just not, that's not how it works. It's just work. It's like, that's the big trick. And so like, I'm a big fan of, like, I don't know, like, if you want to do a 2,000 page graphic novel, how soon do you have to do page 1 to get that thing done? Because when you're 90, is it going to be possible? When you're 40, is it going to be possible? Like, maybe it is something you actually would have to start now in order to get it done, you know? So like, to me, I never, like, it's different personalities, but I feel like you've got to do what you need to do. So for Scott, like what he was describing, and there are different personalities like that, where it's like you have to have multiple projects going on at once. that's really effective, especially long term, because like later on you might have like 10 things out. You know, when somebody who's like dedicating to one thing will have one, and your chances for success are possibly spread out as well. But at the same time, if like there's one thing among those 5 things that you really think you should be doing, maybe that's the thing to do. That's kind of the point that I get to with it. So I'm like a real stickler for, but then again, I'm also the person who like, I try to coax everyone into doing like some crazy long form project because I'm doing one. So I'm like, come on guys, join me. It's fun cartooning. I got some cartoon shit if you want. You know, like that kind of thing.
Yeah, like the devil, like come to my side.
Totally. But at the same time, it's like I part of why I say that with such vigor is like I've literally been in scenarios where there's people who directed Disney films and they're like, I always wanted to do a graphic novel, but I never had the time. And I'm like, you directed an animated feature and you didn't, but they wanted to do, they had this vision that they never made happen and they regret it and they're older. It's like, I don't want to be that person. Like I'd rather be in the reverse where I did the thing that I wanted to do and then I'm like, yeah, you know, that might have been a fun day job. You know, like, does that make sense? I don't know.
Yeah.
So that's like the way I take it. But once again, I think it's for each personality because like I do understand the drive to like want to quit. And I do have moments where I'm like, I really want to like, and I'll occasionally do that where I'm like, I want to do a poster. So I'll do a poster or something like that. But I mostly fight it. And the one thing that keeps me from getting distracted is just the main thing I'm doing right now is like the one thing I really feel like I'm supposed to be doing. So it's like, it's not a hard thing to decide to kind of focus most of my priorities. Like when it's not just like making money to eat, like, it's not a hard decision because I'm like, okay, I know pretty clearly like what I need to be doing. So I feel like my contrarian part is mostly for anybody out there who might have that knowledge. I'm like, forget like gaining the confidence to do it. Just start doing it. That's how you'll gain the confidence, you know? Yeah. But I also agree. I don't know. I also agree with Scott, like getting little projects done and just having that experience of finishing can give you the confidence to kind of continue and learn how to finish. But I'm a big fan of just like take on the ocean and like, at least you'll get, you know, a little bit of swimming practice, you know, in the meantime. I don't know.
I mean,
maybe I'm crazy.
I agree with the just, you know, do it part, but I would say you really have to know yourself really well I just, that makes, because I just think a lot of people struggle with wanting to do that big epic story and you know, that's a big undertaking. I mean, there's people that, like you said, Dave Sim, and there's people that have done that. But I mean, if you've, I don't know, I would say if you've never done really produced anything at all, start small. Like I said, I would, you know, then maybe the next time you could go larger. But I don't know. I think if you're struggling with something, start small. But we can agree to disagree on that.
Yeah, I have to say, like, I'm not trying to mediate or anything, but I think a lot of people think they have an epic story in their hands and they don't.
Yes, that's true.
So they think it's epic because there's armor and swords, and then it's a small story. So actually write it, and you'll be surprised of how small your story actually is.
Agreed. And also, here's where I will totally agree with Scott, like taking the contrarian hat off or whatever. But it's like comics are hard. So at least get your feet wet doing comics a little bit. Like at least get in the ring, try a couple rounds before you go for broke on it, because it's like making comics is a massive commitment. And so you can see with the Hundreds group, like just to make a 4-page comic, a lot of people who haven't done comics would just be like, oh, that's cool, I'll just knock that out in a couple days or something. But you know, there's a lot of people in that group who are really seasoned cartoonists who are still at it, and they've been at it for months, you know, and it's 4 pages. So I would agree, like you definitely want to know what you're getting into before you get in the ring. But also, if you're waiting for that moment that you're ready, to do something you need to do, definitely just stop waiting and just do it. So like a good starting point would be like write it out. And then also maybe before investing all the resources and like pouring your heart into making it, like have other people read it and tell you if it's any good. And people who aren't going to just be like, oh, that's wonderful, and they're relatives or something, you know, like show it to people who are kind of critical and see like, is this kind of working, you know, but still, I do tend to side with the idea of like, I don't know, like a couple pages done is better than none, and like a vision that just never gets realized, you know. That to me is, I think that's where we'd all agree, is just like one of the things that bums me out as somebody who's creating, is meeting somebody who's like, I always wanted to, or has that attitude of like, you know, yeah, I have this big vision for a story, and it's like, well, really, but like, do it then. Like, you know, that's the part that kind of gets under my skin, because it's like there's a lot of people in the trenches doing the work, and then they're going to end up with a story, and whether it's good or not, at least it's done. You know, yeah. But I agree too, there's like what you were saying about the people who have this vision of an epic story. I also knew a lot of people who were like building like a whole fantasy genre, and they thought they were like the next Tolkien, and you'd read like their notes and you'd be like, this is like, you know, you could probably do this as like a short story, or like 2 pages or 5 pages, rather than like a giant epic, you know. So yeah,
break their hearts. It's like, this is 2 pages.
Yeah.
But yeah,
it's a tough one, you know, but at the same time, I'd still be happier seeing somebody actually tackle it and get it done than just like kind of dreaming about it, because it just feels like that's just possibly on the road to like an unrealized thing, you know.
Yeah. So I think we're probably at that kind of hour and a half, so we probably should start wrapping up. But I just wanted to know, Teresa, is there anything that that you wanted to cover that we didn't get to? I mean, I looked over your notes, and I think we covered most of the things you wanted to talk about. But if there's anything that you kind of were holding on to, something that we were talking about that you wanted to add to, or anything like that?
No, I'm happy.
All right, awesome. So we will kind of go around the room and everything. So Josh, where do you want to drive people to, and anything else you want to say before we log out here?
So within 1 minute or 2 minutes, there will be a new page on my Tapas, my webcomic on Tapas. So go there and check out the latest page. Quarterly Stories is the name of the comic. You can also go to quarterlystories.com and kind of read it all the way up to the most current page. So there's 2 ways to find me. And then I just wanted to lastly just say it's been a real pleasure having you on, Teresa, and like super great conversation. And we like your work and stuff. So we're excited about this anthology. It's going to be cool. It's such a good community, you know, of artists. It's going to be fun to see everybody in that book, you know.
Yeah, thank you.
So where can everyone find you, Teresa?
Well, I'm here on YouTube. I'm Teresa del Pilar. I'm Teresa as in Teresa without the H, and Del, D-E-L, and then Pilar as in a pillar, you know, in a construction site or whatever. And you can find me on Instagram. You can find me here on YouTube, and you can find me on Webtoons. My comic is in there. It's called Graduation Nightmares. And yeah, just search it and you will find it.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to put that link. I'll put that link in the description there. All right. Okay, and as far as me, you're on my channel, you know who I am. But if you haven't heard yet, I've got a Kickstarter that's going right now for my comic book Young and the Dead. It's a kids versus zombie story. It's like Goonies meets Night of the Living Dead. If you like old 80s action adventure movies featuring kids, it's basically just kids fighting zombies, and it's a lot of fun. It takes, like I said, it takes place in the 80s. There's a lot of nostalgia to it and everything. And you can find that at youngandthedead.com. That'll take you right to the Kickstarter. And it's getting close. I think we got a little more than a week, but it's getting down to the nitty gritty. So definitely check it out, or share share it, let people know about it if you think you might know anyone who might be interested in that. Anyone that likes like Stranger Things or anything. I know Stranger Things is coming back. We've got the trailer and everything. So if you like that stuff, you'll probably like Young and the Dead. Other than that, I want to thank Teresa for coming on, and I want to thank everyone in the chat. The chat, despite us coming on a little later, or earlier in some people's case, but yeah, we got a lot of activity in the chat and everything. So thank you to everyone in the chat, and yeah, since we're coming in on the end of the kind of the 100s, there might only be an episode or two left, kind of featuring artists from the 100s anthology. So if you're doing the anthology, if you haven't been on the show yet, let us know, because you might miss out on that opportunity, because it's only a few more episodes before we start wrapping this thing up. So yeah, and anyone that's working on their projects, yeah, we got to get that into gear, because it's getting close. So anyway, yeah, thanks to everyone. Thanks to everyone in the chat. Thanks to Teresa. Thanks to Josh. Thanks to anyone watching after the fact. And I guess we'll see everyone next week. Oh wait, I totally forgot. I spaced out. if you're not familiar with the show, we do it every week, but it bounces back and forth between Josh's channel and my channel. The best way to know exactly when we're going to be on what time, like I said, we went a little later today. So the time could be different. The day sometimes can be different, and the channel is different, which can get confusing. But if you don't want to be confused, join our mailing list. We don't spam you or anything. We just send out, usually about 30 minutes ahead of time, we send out a link, and we'll let you know where you can find what channel and what time and everything that the Artcasters is. And again, that link to that newsletter will be in the description of this video, along with everyone on the show today and where you can find us on social media. So thanks, everyone. We'll see you guys next week.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.